At the moment the laughter hit, it sounded like silverware clinking against glass, bright, brittle, and a little cruel. Ethan lifted his tumbler and let the amber catch the chandelier. "Maggie follows me around like a little puppy," he said, smiling toward the table of partners and their wives. "Can't help herself. Adorable, really." They laughed as if he'd complimented me. I tilted my head just so, the way photographs forgive, and sipped my champagne. The flute didn't tremble. I've learned that the trick to surviving public humiliation is to make your body into a still life. Shoulders soft, chin lowered by a hair, smile that reads as gracious on camera and invisible in person. Inside something clicked into place. Not anger. Not shame. Something clean, like a lens snapping into focus. "Tell them how you always texted me first," he went on, turning the story into a script he loved to perform. Persistent little thing. What could I do? Eventually I gave in. More laughter. Someone tapped a fork to a glass. Someone else said I was lucky to have a husband so successful, so in demand. I let the sound wash over me like a badly chosen cologne. "Another round?" the waiter asked. "Same for me," Ethan said, hand sliding to my waist, a proprietary press as practiced as his signature. "And bring my wife a martini, she always forgets what she likes." I don't forget. I have never been allowed to remember. On the terrace, the city breathed below us. A grid of light and money, the kind of view that makes people generous with other people's dignity. Ethan's golf buddies, chisels and tuxedos, leaned back in their chairs talking about markets with the casual cruelty of men who've never been told no twice in a row. I placed the cocktail napkin beneath a sweating glass with the kind of precision that gets mistaken for devotion. "Show them your walk," Ethan said in a stage whisper that wasn't a whisper at all. "It's perfect. Took years to get her housebroken." He laughed. They joined him. The word housebroken threaded through the air like a hairline crack in crystal. I smiled the way I've practiced in mirrors. A crescent of compliance. Through the corner of my eye, I caught my reflection in the terrace door. Sleek bun, midnight silk. A diamond that announced his generosity more loudly than any toast. Everything about me curated. The dress he'd chosen, the shade of lipstick he considered tasteful, the laugh he preferred, lighter, less. Even my silence had been tuned to his pitch. He leaned close. "Don't sulk," he said, breath warm with scotch. "It makes people uncomfortable." "Of course," I said, and set the tray down without a sound. The ballroom hummed when we moved inside. Money's version of quiet. Chandeliers glittered. The string quartet hit the sweet spot between elegance and absence. The company's logo floated on the far wall in tasteful gold, as if wealth were a gentle thought everyone was having together. Ethan rotated us through his orbit. Partners, clients, women with diamond wrists and tired smiles. Every introduction was a small subtraction. "This is Maggie," he said to a junior VP who had already decided I was decorative. "She keeps me on time," he added as if I were a calendar with legs. "Lovely," the VP's wife said and checked my dress label with her eyes. When the awards moved into their middle acts and the speeches dissolved into the clink of cutlery, I excused myself. The corridor outside the ballroom smelled faintly of lemon polish and old applause. I pressed my palm to the cool marble wall and stayed very still, as if stillness could be a door. People assume humiliation is loud. It isn't. It's a quiet room inside your chest where you decide what to take with you when you leave. I re-entered as the MC began a story about building something from nothing. Every gala needs its myth. Ethan glanced up and beckoned. I returned to the table, the good wife in a well-lit painting. He placed his hand on my knee, that little pressure that meant, smile at the right places. Disappear at the rest. I did both flawlessly. By the time the dessert spoons chimed against porcelain, the decision in me had hardened into a shape I recognized. Not a weapon exactly. A tool. The difference is what you build with it. Outside, the valet line curled like ribbon. "Keys for Caldwell," Ethan said, and the attendant straightened because tips travel quicker than gossip. He opened the door for me, palm grazing my back in that rehearsed possessive. The city air was warm enough to soften starch. "Good night, Mr. Caldwell," the attendant said. Ethan liked hearing that. The drive home was a catalogue of his opinions. The speech that went too long, the partner who'd gone soft, the market that would reward discipline in Q3 if people had the stomach for it. He didn't ask what I thought because he already knew I thought what he thought when he thought it at the volume he preferred. We pulled beneath our building's arch. a polite cathedral of glass and guards, and rode the elevator to our floor. The penthouse greeted us with the expensive hush of things that don't break. Ethan tossed his cufflinks into the ceramic bowl I bought in Florence, then said it like a benediction, "You did well tonight." I almost laughed. "Thank you." "You laughed a little loud with Garrett," he added, moving the needle from indulgence to instruction. "Remember, feminine, not bold." He skimmed a fingertip under my chin. "You're perfect when you're careful." "Of course," I said again. "The difference between a cage and a home is whether you can choose the door." He disappeared toward his office with his phone, already composing the version of the evening he'd post later. Something about gratitude, mentorship, the company's vision. I stood alone in the foyer, surrounded by the still life of our life. The eucalyptus in the dark glass vase, the abstract we'd purchased because the gallery said it had movement. Everything had movement except me. In the mirror above the console table, a woman looked back. Not a stranger. A well-lit capture of someone mid-vanish. I lifted my hands to remove the diamond studs and paused. The studs were not heavy. It was the story pinned to them. "He thinks I'm trained," I said to the woman in the glass, my voice almost conversational. "He'll soon learn who trained whom." I changed silk to cotton, bone-colored quiet to the soft black I buy for myself when no one is watching, and padded into the kitchen, the after-party of domesticity waiting. The immaculate sink, the refrigerator's low hum, a glass that turned water into something clean. The city flared beneath the window, a constellation I had once known street by street. I used to walk until my legs burned just enough to make my brain stop calculating. That was before. I placed my phone on the island. For a while I watched the screen as if the next necessary thing might announce itself. It didn't. That was my job. In the guest room, the room Ethan called the study when he wanted it to matter, there was a closet I kept properly dull. Winter coats. Extra linens. Forgotten gifts from people who mistake price for intimacy. Behind the coats, there is a seam you don't notice unless you know to look. I know to look. My fingers found the panel and pressed. The small click sounded like a metronome starting a new piece. Inside, a shallow shelf, a folder the color of weathered wheat, a laptop wrapped in a scarf that used to be my favorite. Not tonight's work. Not yet. Tonight's work was simpler. Remember that I am someone who has a door. I closed the panel and returned to the bedroom. Ethan's voice carried from down the hall, a measured tone he saved for clients and mirrors. He laughed at something on his screen, not realizing how much he laughed alone. I slid beneath the sheets and lay on my back, listening to the building breathe, elevator cables, the heating system's careful exhale, a car sighing into the garage 6 floors down. The ceiling threw back the city's glow, pale as an old bruise. Tonight was the last time, I told the quiet. Ethan entered, the light from his phone turning his face blue for a moment. "You're already in bed," he said, surprised, as if sleep were another thing he managed. "Good. We've got an early start. I promised the team we'd be at the breakfast round table at 8. "We will," I said. It came out calm, almost affectionate. He put the phone down with a satisfied sigh, then reached for me, draping an arm across my waist like a seatbelt. "Hi, girl," he murmured, and fell asleep in minutes. The privilege of people who mistake other people's vigilance for peace. I watched the numbers on the alarm clock change, tiny red gestures in the dark. There is a moment before sleep when the mind returns to its original size. That's when I saw it. Not the gala, not the terrace, not the laughter that had bounced like glass around the table. I saw a door opening and a rectangle of night beyond it. Cool air on my face. The sound a small lock makes when it understands it was never made for me in the first place. The city thinned toward morning. Ethan snored lightly, the kind of soft growl that used to mean home to me. I turned onto my side and faced the window. From this angle, the skyline looked like a heartbeat on a monitor. I smiled. My smile, unpracticed and therefore true. Tomorrow I thought I'll start remembering what I like. And the day after that I'll start acting like the woman who liked it. If you've ever been minimized by someone who should have lifted you up, you already know. The smallest decision can be the largest door. Mine swung on a quiet hinge tonight. And I walked through. Morning sunlight seeped through the sheer curtains like a polite intruder. Ethan was already gone, his side of the bed smooth and scentless except for the faint trace of his cologne, cedar and control. On the kitchen island sat a note written in his precise, masculine handwriting. Breakfast meeting. Remember to confirm the floral arrangement for tonight's dinner. Keep it elegant, not loud. I stared at it for a moment before sliding it into the trash. Even his reminders came as commands. The penthouse felt staged, like an expensive showroom where people pretend to live. Every detail had been chosen by Ethan. The marble, the muted color palette, the artwork that looked like money frozen on canvas. I had mistaken that control for care once. Now it felt like ownership. I poured coffee into one of the cups from our wedding registry, the one he'd selected because it photographed well. I had chosen nothing in this life except my silence, and even that had been curated to fit his tone. On the dining table sat a stack of glossy magazines with his interviews, his quotes about leadership, his smiling face beneath bold captions. Vision. Power. Precision. He looked unstoppable on the page. But I knew better. I had seen him tremble once. The night he realized a client had chosen my idea instead of his. That was the night he said it was embarrassing to have a wife who competed with him. That was the night I shut down my company. For love, I told myself. For peace. 7 years later, love and peace had both gone missing. I walked to the bedroom closet, where rows of designer dresses hung like soldiers at attention. All chosen by him. All approved. I pushed them aside and reached for the small wooden panel behind the last hanger. The secret space Ethan didn't know existed. Inside, everything smelled faintly of paper and defiance. A rolled-up business diploma from Wharton. My CPA certification. A worn photo of me with my first team at Thorne Analytics, the consulting firm I built before I became Mrs. Caldwell. And a flash drive labeled Phase 1. I held it in my palm, my heartbeat steady. It contained the original client database of my company, hundreds of contacts, reports, and financial models. I hadn't looked at it in years, but I had kept it like an insurance policy against forgetting who I was. A faint vibration pulled me back. My phone lit up with Ethan's name. Remember dinner at the hotel tonight. Don't be late. Dress understated. Understated. The word meant invisible. I typed a single reply, of course. Then I turned the flash drive over in my hand, watching the light glint off the metallic surface. That afternoon I found myself at the small cafe I used to work from years ago. The barista, a college kid with bright eyes, asked if I wanted my usual. It startled me. Someone still remembered. Yes, I said softly. The usual. I sat by the window and opened my laptop, not the one Ethan had gifted but the old one hidden behind the panel. The screen came to life slowly as if waking from a long coma. My name appeared in the corner. Maggie Thorne. For the first time in years I smiled at it. The inbox held hundreds of messages. Dormant, outdated, yet alive. I scrolled through names. Clara, Benjamin, Nadia. People I used to brainstorm with, argue with, laugh with. One name made my breath catch. Clara Evans. My former business partner. Her last message, dated 6 years ago, read, "You'll come back, Maggie. I'm keeping your 40% until you do." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I hit reply. I'm ready to talk. For a long time, my hands hovered over the keys before pressing send. It felt like turning a key in a long-forgotten lock. When I looked up, the city beyond the window was the same, but I wasn't. That night, Ethan returned home with his usual self-importance, tie loosened just enough to suggest exhaustion rather than arrogance. He kissed my cheek mechanically. "The investors loved the presentation," he said. "You'll sit next to me tomorrow night. Smile but don't talk numbers. Leave that to the men." I nodded and poured his scotch. Of course. Inside, the click of something new began. Not defiance, planning. When he turned his back, I opened my phone and saw a reply from Clara. "I knew you'd wake up someday. Call me. We need to talk about ownership and about Ethan." That word hit different now. I watched Ethan step into his study, his silhouette framed by the city lights. The picture of a powerful man who had no idea his empire was built on someone else's silence. As the door closed behind him, I whispered to the empty room. "You trained me to obey. Unfortunately, you also trained me to observe." The difference between those two things was about to ruin him. The next morning, Ethan was already in his navy suit, standing in front of the mirror, rehearsing confidence like it was part of his skincare routine. He caught my reflection behind him. "Don't wear red tonight," he said casually, adjusting his cufflinks. It's too loud for the kind of image we need. There was never a we in Ethan's sentences unless it meant him multiplied by 2. After he left, the apartment felt like an empty theater after a long play, the silence thick with leftover applause. I poured coffee, black and strong, and opened my laptop. Clara had replied again. I didn't file the ownership transfer when you married him. You still legally hold 40% of Thorn Analytics. He doesn't know, does he? My fingers tightened on the mug. No, he didn't. He thought I'd signed everything away for love, and maybe, foolishly, I had believed I did. Claire wanted to meet. I agreed. She looked the same, only sharper. Same steady eyes, same posture that made people listen. God, Maggie, she said as we hugged. You disappeared like a ghost. I thought he'd buried you. In a way, he did, I said quietly. I just finally remembered where I was buried. We sat in a corner booth, the city humming outside the cafe window. Clara slid a file across the table. Contracts, ledgers, old emails, company valuation reports. Your name's still on everything, she said. We just landed a new client. Morrison Tech. They asked about you. I stared at the paper. My signature, neat and certain, stared back at me from the page like an old friend. Claire leaned in. If you want back in, all you have to do is say yes. For a long moment I didn't speak. The old me, the woman who used to lead boardrooms, who never second-guessed her decisions, stirred beneath the years of trained compliance. Finally I said, send me the reports. I'll review them tonight. When I returned home, Ethan was in his study, phone pressed to his ear, pacing. She's not ambitious, he was saying to someone. That's her charm. Maggie's content being supportive. He saw me at the doorway and smiled like a man who believed his own myth. Dinner in 20, he said, covering the receiver. I told the caterer to keep it simple. No need to overdo it. I nodded, pretending not to hear the echo of his words. She's not ambitious. Later that night, when he finally fell asleep, one arm flung across the bed like a king claiming territory, I slipped out quietly. My heart pounded, but not from fear. From momentum. At the desk I connected my flash drive. The laptop hummed, screen flickering to life. Rows of data bloomed like long-buried roots finding daylight again. Client archives, performance metrics, email correspondences. My old world. Precise, brilliant, alive. Then out of curiosity I opened Ethan's email folder. He'd never think I'd know his password. Our anniversary backward. Predictable. Within seconds I was in. And what I saw made my stomach twist. He had been moving money, small transfers from our joint account into one under his name only. 40,000 here. 25,000 there. All carefully timed. Attached to the emails were legal documents. Draft divorce agreements. Private messages with his lawyer friend Daniel Reeves. Need to ensure Maggie stays financially dependent. Can't let her rebuild anything. Once she's fully detached, we can proceed quietly. Quietly. That word burned hotter than any insult. I scrolled further. Photos from company events, dinner reservations, one labeled Kelly, Friday night. His assistant. The timestamps overlapped with his business trips. The betrayal wasn't shocking. What shocked me was how calmly I accepted it. Like I had already known somewhere deep down. I closed the laptop. Then I smiled. A real smile this time. Because what Ethan didn't know was that I had proof. Of everything. The next morning he found me in the kitchen. You're up early, he said, surprised. Couldn't sleep, I replied, stirring sugar into my coffee. Too many ideas in my head. He laughed. Ideas? Yes, I said softly. You'd be amazed what a woman can think of when she stops being afraid. He chuckled, assuming it was a joke. But as he kissed my cheek and grabbed his briefcase, my phone buzzed with a new message from Clara. Morrison Tech wants a meeting next week. They asked if you'd join as a senior partner. I typed back, yes. I'm ready. When the elevator doors closed behind him, I let the quiet expand again, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. I walked to the hidden panel in the closet, touched the edge of the wood and whispered to myself, Phase 1, complete. The day Clara confirmed my ownership, something in my chest realigned, like a compass needle finally remembering where north was. That night I lay awake, the ceiling above me reflecting faint city light. Ethan slept soundly beside me, snoring softly, secure in his illusion of control. He didn't realize that every breath he took beside me was now timed by my patience. The next morning I met Nadia Trent, a corporate attorney Clara had recommended. Nadia wasn't what I expected. No sharp suits or calculated intimidation, just steady eyes and the kind of confidence that didn't need to raise its voice. "Women like you don't just disappear," she said, flipping through the files I'd brought. "Men like him build cages, but they forget. Someone has to hand them the tools." Her tone was calm, surgical. "He's been transferring funds, yes? We'll need full statements. Every cent. Don't confront him yet. Let him think you're still obedient." I smiled thinly. "That's my specialty." Nadia's lips twitched. "Good. Then we'll use his expectations as cover. Document everything. And when you're ready, don't whisper. Announce." 2 days later, Ethan's secretary Holly showed up at the cafe where I was supposed to meet Clara. Her eyes darted around before she slid into the seat across from me. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "If he finds out, I'm done." "Holly, it's okay," I said softly. "You're safe." She handed me a folded sheet of paper. "He's been meeting someone. Her name's Tina Keller. Marketing consultant. He tells people she's his client." Inside the folded sheet were printouts, hotel bookings, messages, payment transfers from company funds labeled business expense, client meetings. The evidence didn't sting, it validated. He talks about you," Holly added quietly. "He says you're unstable. That you wouldn't survive without him." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you, Holly. That won't be true for much longer." She hesitated before standing. "He's cruel, Maggie. You deserve better." That evening I attended one of Ethan's company dinners. Another night of curated elegance and quiet erasure. He dominated the conversation as usual, dismissing other people's ideas with a condescending chuckle. When someone mentioned my old firm, he smirked. "My Maggie tried the business thing once," he said. "Too soft for that world." I smiled politely, holding my wine glass steady. "True," I said. "But softness can cut deeper than you think." He didn't notice the weight in my tone, he never did. Later, while he laughed with partners near the bar, I moved quietly between small clusters of wives and executives. They were the invisible network of high society power, the women who talked. So I planted seeds. "He's been overworked," I said to one. "So much stress lately. I worry about his memory." Another leaned in. "Memory?" "Yes. He told the CFO last week we met in college. But he didn't go to college." I sighed delicately. "He's just been confused lately, poor thing." It didn't take long. By the end of the night, whispers had started. "Is Ethan Caldwell okay?" Reputation cracks quietly, first in curiosity then in concern. Back home, I watched him pour himself a nightcap, oblivious to the small empire of rumors beginning to form around him. He looked at me over his glass. "You've been quiet tonight." "Just tired," I said. "Too much noise." He chuckled. "That's why you're perfect. You know when to disappear." I smiled. "Do I?" He didn't notice the way I watched him, how I studied every habit, every weakness. Observation was my armor now. In bed while he slept, I sent 2 messages. One to Nadia, evidence secured. Financial, emotional, reputational. And one to Clara, reinstatement confirmed. Schedule the meeting with Morrison Tech. Then I scrolled through the photos Holly had sent me. Ethan laughing with his client. Hand on her waist. Same possessive gesture he used on me. It should have hurt. But all I felt was precision. He had no idea that his empire, the polished reputation, the curated marriage, the illusion of mastery, was already a glass house. And I was done keeping the stones polished. I turned off my phone, rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, I wasn't rehearsing silence. I was planning noise. "They trained me to smile," I whispered, "but they forgot I also learned how to speak." Tomorrow I would start speaking, carefully, strategically, and loudly enough to be heard by everyone who had laughed with him. The foundation was cracking. And I had barely begun. The air inside the storage unit was heavy with dust and memory. When I slid the metal door open, the sound echoed like a door creaking in a cathedral, sacred and final. For years I'd paid the rent on this space without visiting it. It had been my silent rebellion, my small declaration that not everything belonged to Ethan Caldwell. Now, under the dim light of a single bulb, I found the remains of the woman I used to be. Cardboard boxes stacked neatly, each labeled in my own handwriting. Contracts. Boards. Proposals. I opened one and froze. Inside lay a framed plaque. Entrepreneur of the Year, Maggie Thorne, Thorne Analytics, 2014. I traced my name with my finger. It felt foreign and familiar all at once. The next box revealed old photographs. Me standing beside clients giving presentations, laughing freely. There was a light in my eyes I hadn't seen in years. That light had dimmed under Ethan's shadow, hidden behind his expectations and my own fear of losing the comfort he called love. At the bottom of another box, wrapped carefully in tissue, was a birthday card from my mother. The handwriting trembled, but the words didn't. My darling girl, I hope someday you remember who you were before him. You were magnificent. You still are. The words hit like oxygen. I didn't cry, I inhaled. For the first time in 7 years I could breathe. That night I returned home late. Ethan was asleep, his arms sprawled across my side of the bed like a warning sign. I slipped into the guest room instead and laid out everything on the desk. My laptop, the flash drive, the documents Holly had given me, the card from my mother. Then I powered on the laptop. The soft blue glow illuminated my face, reflected in the window like two women staring at each other. The one I had been and the one I was becoming again. The screen filled with charts, plans, names. Clients I had once saved millions for. Contacts who had trusted my instincts more than their own. My hands moved faster with every click. Muscle memory waking from a long sleep. I worked until sunrise. When I finally closed the lid, the city outside was tinted gold, like the world itself was applauding my return. That afternoon I bought the dress. It was black silk, liquid against the skin. A Versace gown that caught the light like sin. The sales associate asked if it was for a special occasion. Yes, I said. A celebration. I didn't mention that it would be the night my husband's empire began to crumble. At home, I hung the dress at the back of the closet, behind Ethan's meticulously arranged suits. He'd never notice it there. He only noticed what reflected well on him. When he came home that evening, he looked pleased with himself. A man approaching his long-awaited reward. The gala's next week, he said, swirling his whiskey. Garrett's presenting my partnership award. Try not to overdo it with the dress. Classic, not flashy. I smiled. Of course. I know exactly what to wear. He kissed my forehead. A gesture that used to mean affection. Now it felt like a stamp. As soon as he left for his study, I sent 3 messages. To Nadia, all assets verified. Prepare filing. To Clara, Thorne Analytics reactivation complete. Morrison Tech confirmed. And to Holly, thank you. You'll be protected. Each sent message was a quiet explosion. The next day while Ethan was at work, I stood in front of my mirror. No makeup. No jewelry. Just me. For years I'd practiced smiling until my face hurt. That day I practiced standing still, not as Ethan's wife but as Maggie Thorne again. Every scar of silence, every nod, every forced smile had built the version of me he wanted. But beneath that version I had been studying him. His patterns, his lies, his arrogance. And now I would use every bit of it. The woman he thought he trained had been learning all along. 3 days later my phone rang. It was Eleanor, the wife of Ethan's senior partner. The same woman who had once smiled through her husband's jokes about obedient wives. Her voice trembled slightly. Maggie, I need to tell you something. She hesitated. 2 years ago at the firm's retreat I saw Ethan, with someone. A young woman from his marketing team. I closed my eyes. Tina Keller, I said. I know. Silence. Then, I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. The way he talks about you, it's cruel. It's all right, I said gently. You just confirmed what I already decided. What's that? She asked. I smiled. That he's going to regret mistaking silence for weakness. That night I stood by the window again, city lights painting my reflection in gold. For 7 years Ethan had built a cage made of luxury and rules. But what he didn't realize was that I had been building something too, quietly, carefully behind every smile and nod. A plan. And the night of the gala would be my curtain call. I touched the black silk gown one last time before closing the closet door. It didn't feel like fabric anymore. It felt like armor. You said I followed you like a puppy, I whispered to the empty room. Let's see how well you beg. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in the kind of glitter that hides rot. From the moment we stepped out of the car, flashbulbs began their mechanical applause. Ethan's hand gripped mine tightly, not lovingly but like a leash. Smile, Maggie, he whispered through clenched teeth. Try not to overdo it. Remember, it's my night. I smiled, just not for him. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers sparkled like interrogations. A string quartet played something elegant and empty. Ethan was in his element, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, performing success like a man auditioning for admiration. He didn't notice how many people were watching me instead. The black silk gown I'd chosen, the one he told me not to wear, shimmered with defiance. The neckline was bold, the back bare. The dress was deliberate. It said, "I'm not your reflection anymore." When the speeches began, I sat still, every muscle rehearsing patience. Garrett, his business partner, took the stage first. Tonight, we honor a man whose vision and leadership have shaped this company. I tuned out the flattery. Instead, I watched the audience, the investors, the clients, the wives. Whispers had already begun circulating since the dinner a week before. Small, curious murmurs. Is Ethan all right? He seems distracted. He wasn't distracted. He was doomed. Then Garrett smiled. And of course, none of this would be possible without his wife, Maggie Caldwell, the charming woman behind the man. Applause. I rose politely. Ethan turned, grinning. Stand, honey, he said. Take a bow. So I did. And then as I sat down, I whispered, you'll want to stay seated for what comes next. He frowned, confused, the last expression of control he'd wear that night. When his name was called, he strode onto the stage with that familiar arrogance. He adjusted the microphone, flashed that boardroom smile. I'm grateful for this honor, he began. It's been a journey built on loyalty, hard work, and the incredible support of my wife, who never gave up on me, even when she chased me like a puppy. Laughter rippled across the room, shallow, nervous. I rose slowly from my seat. You're right, Ethan, I said, my voice clear, steady, amplified by the hush that fell. I did chase you right into your own lies. The microphone feedback crackled. Every head turned. Ethan blinked, the color draining from his face. Maggie, what are you? Since you enjoy telling stories, let me tell the real one, I said. I lifted a small envelope, ivory, embossed with his company logo. Inside this are records of your fund transfers, expense reports labeled as client meetings that took place in hotel suites with a marketing consultant named Tina Keller. Gasps. Chairs scraped against marble. Ethan took a step forward. Maggie, sit down. Or what? I asked, smiling faintly. You'll train me. He froze. The room was silent except for the whisper of the quartet, now abruptly stopping mid-song. I built Thorn Analytics before I became your accessory, I continued. The firm you dismissed as too soft now holds the Morrison Tech contract, a contract your company lost because your assistant sent the files to my team by mistake. I turned to the crowd. So if you're wondering why his presentations lately have seemed familiar, it's because they were stolen from me. Garrett stood flustered. Mrs. Caldwell, this isn't. Not Mrs. Caldwell anymore, I said, turning toward Nadia, who had just stepped into the room, calm as a blade. He handed me a folder. Divorce papers filed this morning, I announced. Along with evidence of corporate misconduct. You'll be hearing from the board, gentlemen. Ethan's face twisted. You can't do this here. I met his gaze evenly. You did it here, Ethan. Every joke, every insult, every lie you told to make me small. I'm just returning the favor. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then somewhere in the back, a woman began clapping, slowly, deliberately. It spread through the room like a spark catching velvet. Applause. Disbelieving, awkward, then thunderous. Ethan's eyes darted wildly, from Garrett to the investors to me. You planned this, he hissed. For years, I said softly. While you were laughing. I stepped closer, my voice low enough for only him to hear. You said I followed you like a puppy. Tonight you'll learn what it feels like to beg. I left him standing under the spotlight, a man stripped of myth, the applause curdling into murmurs around him. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. I could still hear the orchestra resuming behind me, pretending nothing had happened. Nadia joined me on the steps. That, she said, was surgical. I exhaled, the weight of 7 years lifting. No, I replied. That was survival. Hours later, I sat alone in my living room, barefoot, the black dress pooling around me like a shadow I'd finally stepped out of. My phone buzzed with messages. Reporters, colleagues, Clara, Holly. And one from Ethan. Please, we need to talk. You don't understand what you've done. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I deleted the message. He was right about one thing. I didn't fully understand what I'd done, because I hadn't seen yet how far his empire would fall. But I would. Morning light slipped through the curtains, brushing across my bare hands resting on the kitchen counter. No rings. No cuffs. No leash. Ethan was gone. The silence he left behind didn't ache. It hummed. The city outside felt alive again, like it had been holding its breath through 7 years of our marriage. On the Marble Island, my phone buzzed with notifications. News alerts, statements, articles already circulating online. Whitfield partner embroiled in scandal. Leaked files reveal financial misconduct and affair. Wife of corporate executive exposes him at Gala. Each headline was a wound for him, and a rebirth for me. That afternoon I met with Nadia in her office. She poured us both coffee, her tone as sharp as ever. Everything's proceeding smoothly, she said. The board has suspended him pending investigation. The divorce hearing is scheduled for next week. With the trust fund and your reinstated partnership, you'll walk out of this wealthier than when you entered. I nodded. It's not the money, I said. It's the correction. Nadia smiled. Spoken like someone who's finally steering her own narrative. Back at my apartment, one I had leased under my own name, I set up my workspace. The new sign on the glass door read, Maggie Thorne's Strategies. It wasn't large. Not yet. But it was mine. Inside, boxes from my storage unit stood open. Degrees, awards, the framed photo of me at my first corporate pitch. I placed them on the shelf one by one, each item reclaiming a piece of me. And on the center wall I hung the plaque Ethan once mocked. Entrepreneur of the Year, 2014. The reflection in the glass smiled back, steady, self-owned, unafraid. By evening the world had found its new rhythm. Clients called. Old partners reached out. And then my assistant, Holly, stepped into my office holding her tablet. You'll want to see this, she said. On the screen, Ethan. Leaving his firm flanked by reporters. His expression wasn't angry anymore. It was hollow. They shouted questions he didn't answer. Did your wife's accusations cost you your partnership? Is it true you redirected company funds? He said nothing. Just climbed into a car that wasn't his, because the board had repossessed his. I watched in silence. No triumph, no gloating, just closure. Holly hesitated. Do you want me to delete his contact from your phone? I shook my head. No. Leave it. Let it stay there as a reminder, not of him but of what silence cost me. 3 weeks later I found myself standing in front of a conference room full of executives at Morrison Tech. They were my clients now, not his. I presented calmly, my slides crisp, my analysis sharper than ever. Halfway through I caught my reflection in the polished glass wall. For a split second I saw her, the woman who used to flinch when her husband spoke over her. Then I blinked and she was gone. Replaced by someone unshakable. The meeting ended in applause. The contract was signed. That night I drove to the ocean. The wind was cold and the sea looked endless, exactly the way freedom should look. I walked barefoot along the shore, the sand cold under my feet, the horizon melting into gold. My phone buzzed once. A new number, but I knew who it was before I even looked. I see now what I lost. The message glowed against the dark. I typed a reply, then paused, smiled, and deleted it. No answer was the most powerful one. I slipped the phone into my pocket and turned toward the water. You didn't lose me, I whispered. You never knew me. Back in the city, Thorne Strategies grew faster than I expected. Eleanor joined as my media director, leaving her husband's firm behind. Holly became my executive assistant. Clara and I co-led new projects, helping women reclaim their businesses after financial abuse. It became more than a company, it became a movement. Every success was quiet vengeance. Every new client, a reclamation. And sometimes when I gave keynote speeches or interviews, people would ask, how did you find the courage to stand up in that ballroom? I always gave the same answer. I didn't find courage that night. I found myself. Months later, I stood in my office as the sun dipped below the skyline. The glass walls glowed amber, my reflection surrounded by light. I picked up the same envelope I had once left on Ethan's podium and smiled. That night, I had left him begging for mercy. But the real victory wasn't his humiliation. It was the quiet, unstoppable life that followed. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about rebuilding yourself so powerfully that they can never touch you again. If you were Maggie, would you have exposed him publicly, or rebuilt quietly and let karma speak for you? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in reclaiming your power, hit subscribe. Because this isn't just a story of revenge. It's a story of resurrection. Rose.